John Brown, born in 1800 in Connecticut, became an orphan at the age of 8 years old when he was taken in by a slave-owning landlord and witnessed the brutality this man enacted on one of his slaves, who happened to be one of John's only childhood friends. Growing up, he became acquainted with Calvinism and the works of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who claimed that the Founding Fathers should have refused the Three-Fifths Compromise at the risk of making no union. He was known by the age of 12 to have been voicing his opinion on abolition and declaring his extreme hatred for the evil that it was. As he grew older and had a family, he moved to Kansas, along with the influx of abolitionists and social migrants coming from Union states in search of land. In Kansas, John Brown was known for being an outspoken abolitionist, where a clash of pro-slavers and abolitionists often butted heads in disputes. In a letter he wrote to his wife, Brown explains a civil dispute in which two men have an argument over land, and one shoots and kills the other. The issue quickly erupts and divided into two groups, anti-slavers and pro-slavers. The man who stood guilty of shooting his neighbor was acquitted and trialed, as it was held by fellow pro-slavers. Instances such as these showed the conflict that either political side faced in living in the same state. Tensions eventually grew to the point in which pro-slavers held many abolitionists' families hostage, and John Brown ordered his men to execute 5 pro-slavery men in what is known as the Pottawatomie Massacre. There were several more skirmishes fought in Kansas, earning the state the nickname Bloody Kansas. During this rebellious attack in Kansas, John Brown lost 3 of his grown sons in battle. John Brown eventually signed his legacy in his biggest and final aggressive act in slavery, his attack on a U.S. arsenal called Harper's Ferry, where he took control of an area and told the slaves they were free. Only 5 took up the offer and were eventually caught, as the militia, ordered by General Robert E. Lee, finally took John Brown as prisoner, and killed many of his men that stayed behind. In prison to await his trial, John Brown has the opportunity to plead for insanity, as many of his family line were found to have been plagued with mental illness. John Brown instead insisted that he was of sound mind and of more reason than most. John Brown was the first person executed for treason in the United States, hanged at the age of 59 for the death of 7 individuals at Harper's Ferry. John Brown was held as an example of radical Republican body, an example used within the southern states as fear of insurrection group. George Fitzhugh, a pro-slavery social theorist, mentioned, "The most conservative must see, and if honest will admit that the settlement of Northerners among us is fraught with danger." Abraham Lincoln went on to denounce John Brown's actions in his Cooper Union address, stating, "John Brown's effort was peculiar. It was not a slave insurrection, it was an attempt by white men to give up a revolt among slaves, in which the slaves refused to participate." John Brown was held as an example of Republican radicalism, where his case was often dismissed by Republicans as insane, and by Southerners as a terrorist. John Brown will always be remembered for good and bad, as an abolitionist that took extreme measures in order to create extreme change, or as a terrorist whose only goal was to stir up insurrection. Whichever the title, many abolitionists still rally behind his conviction as a martyr in song. John Brown's body lies a moldering in the grave, but his soul is marching on.